Are you ready to do something fun today? Let's do something fun. Let's do some math, because everybody knows that math is fun. Well, at least my wife thinks so. Me, not so much. But we'll talk about something in just a moment that I think this math will help out with your business and make you more successful and be able to do a much better job at controlling things. Stay tuned.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack, damaging blue light from the sun. Your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Hi, I want to talk to you for just a moment about a great lens that we are using in our practice. It is the Varilux XR Design lens. And the reason we love it is because of what it's doing for our guests in our practice. Don't get me wrong, Varilux has been making great lenses for years, and I'm sure they're going to have one better than this eventually. But the Varilux XR Design and the Varilux XR Track are truly making lives better for my guests in my practice. When I'm talking to them about it in the practice, I basically say this. I say, there's a lot of progressive lenses that you've had where you've had a little bit of a challenge. You kind of got to figure out exactly where that reading spot, that sweet spot is on your lens. Well, with this lens, they figured out a way of how to put the in-between vision and the near vision in the same place. And the reason they do that is because they take into account a lot of specific measurements about you, including the fact that we've got this special computer. It's basically based on an iPad. I don't go into all of that, called an iRuler 2. They'll take more or less a 3D rendering of how your eye sits on that lens. What that does for you is keep you from having to figure out where to look through that lens. And that's going to make you a lot more happy with your life. Not to mention the fact, can't you imagine what it's going to be like to go home and your eyes still feel good? And for those people who are dealing with a little bit more challenge, I also recommend doing the XR Track. The reason I like this very much is because it's actually watching the way eyes move. Through using the iRuler program, they'll hold the iPad and they'll watch these dots go around, and it truly maps the way the eye moves. That comes up with a really good formulation of how they can perfect this lens and make the vision work better. So if you really want to know more about the Varilux XR lens line, please get with your Essilor account representative as soon as possible. Thank you.
On episode 102 of this podcast, Chris interviewed Justin Kwan, Michelle Andrews, and Richard Ruth. They pointed out that as a profession, we have done a great job of letting our patients know that myopia is not a big deal. If you can see 20/20, there is no worry. It is the high myopes that are more danger. And as they said, that message is tragic. Any myopia has a higher risk of maculopathy, glaucoma, and earlier cataract development. In the MiSight one-day clinical trials, only 4% of study participants who got ProClear one-days stayed stable in their myopia progression over the 3-year period. That means you can confidently say, parent, by not going to a system geared to slow the myopia progression, there is a 96% chance your child's vision will get worse. This may take away some of the choice your child has in the future as to how they will correct their vision. Choice, not fear of the disease associations with myopia, is what best resonates with parents when it comes to myopia control for their children. And with CooperVision's MiSight One Day, we now have an FDA-approved single-use contact lens to lessen the progression of myopia in our patients. Contact your CooperVision representative to find out more about MiSight One Day contact lenses.
Hello and welcome to the Vision of Leadership podcast. I'm Ted McElroy, your host, and today is another one of the solo episodes I've been working on. This is kind of figuring into my not-so-perfect life and living my not-so-perfect life. So this is me just being vulnerable about the fact that I've not got the perfect situation. I don't have my microphone with me that makes me sound all great because I left it at the office. But I wanted to get some episodes out because it's been a long time since I've had some content, and I think this is stuff worth sharing, and probably something you're struggling with right now. Today we're going to talk about the most expensive thing that you have in your business. So we're going to do some math to figure that out. And let me let you know a little bit that. Think about for a moment, of all the expenses that you have in your business, your practice, what is the single most expensive thing that you have to pay out for? What do you think it is? Is it some piece of technology? Is it the building? Is it um, some new piece of software you brought in? Your cost of goods? No, because those are all separate pieces. Here's the secret. You are the most expensive thing, pretty much, in your practice, your business. Because you probably pay yourself probably more in one single payment over the year than anybody else, or anything else for that matter. I mean, you've worked hard for it though. You've put yourself into a place to set yourself here, and it's important that you're using the tool that you are, and I mean that in a good way, not in a bad way. You're using this resource in the way it should be used. The problem is most of us, and I'm very guilty of this still, and I'm getting much better at it, most of us tend to plug ourselves into places that we shouldn't be doing that. And that's costing our business money. I'll get more about that in just a moment. So let's talk about something like knowing your number. This is something that I learned when I was going through the Michael Hyatt Full Focus program called Business Accelerator. And that was a program that was set together to put different business owners and executives together in a room with other business executives and really try to learn how to win at life and succeed in business. Because it was kind of the double win that Michael called it. So what he would basically do is he would teach us these different lessons. And this was probably one of the better lessons I got, because I started making me realize that I was utilizing my time and my resource, myself, in the wrong way. How many of you have ever had someone come to you and say something like, "Hey, leader, the computer didn't back up yesterday," and you go spend the next 4 or 5 hours working on trying to figure that out between guests or working on whatever you're doing. Or there's a piece of technology that's not working in the practice right now. I need you to come, and you spend whatever it takes to figure out how to fix that. Now, sometimes there really is no other choice. I mean, you got to get things going, and you may be the one that has that knowledge, and maybe you can, in that point, get something done a little quicker. Maybe it's just turning something on, turning something off. They're just too scared to do it. But for the most part, we tend to insert ourselves in places that we shouldn't. We start using a crowbar instead of a hammer. We start using a hammer instead of this delicate device to push something through. We just utilize the tools that we have in the wrong way. And part of that's because we just don't know how much it costs. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out what those costs are. So what I'd like you to do when you have a moment, I'm going to briefly go through this. You can go back and listen to it later when you're not in the car, or you're not on your run, or you're not doing your whatever you're doing, that you're playing this in the background to sort of distract yourself away from what you're doing. I'd like you to take this section right through here for the next maybe 5 or 10 minutes and listen back through it with a piece of paper and thoughtfully go through this process of knowing what your number is. So the first thing you need to know is, what is your salary? And by salary, I mean what's written on your W-2 that you get from your business or wherever you're working. Whatever that number might be. We're going to keep numbers really round and simple, and we're just going to call it $100,000 right now. So let's say, and I know that's woefully low for most of you, but just to keep math simple, $100,000. So you are going to get paid $100,000 a year. That's what's on your W-2. Now that's everything that you get paid to work on or in your business. That means if you are, doing books for everything, all that kind of stuff goes into it. Now, if you have a side gig, like maybe you do speaking engagements, or maybe you have some other thing that is related to your industry, but isn't exactly part of the part that you do that creates revenue for your business, that doesn't count. So don't put that number in there. Just the money that you get paid on your W-2. Got that number? Great. Now, the next number you need to know is, how many days are you going to be working in or on the business? How many days exactly? So the way you do this is you take your calendar. Let's go ahead and just do the 365 and not worry about that 1 year that's weird. We're just going to do with 365. How many days were you actually out of the business? Well, if you don't work on Saturdays and Sundays, automatically, that's 104 days that you can take off of that 365. And then you're on vacation. I'm getting ready to go on vacation tomorrow. I'll be gone for from Friday to the following Sunday, but I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays, so I can't count those days, but I can count today. I'm not actually seeing guests today. I took an extra day off just to do some podcasts and some other things. I'm also going to play around the golf after a while. And tomorrow is my birthday, and I'll be traveling on my birthday, so I want to do something fun on my birthday. So I took the today to do some of these kind of things. Tomorrow I'll be traveling, but that's 2 days right there. And then all next week, 5 days more, 7 days I don't go. Last week we had a meeting in South Carolina for the Georgia Optometric Association. I did not work that Friday. There's another day. If I went to Seco, or if I went to the Vision Source Exchange, or if I went to some other kind of thing that took me out of the office that I could not do work for the business, those kind of days count toward that. So just for the sake of argument, we're going to keep it simple again, and we're going to say I worked 200 days a year. Okay, so now I know that I got paid $100,000. I'm doing the math on the calculator, so I don't say this wrong, because my wife would freak out because she is a math teacher. And yes, I can't do simple math in my head. So I get paid basically $500 a day, if that's the case. That's what my daily salary is. Now, the next number you need to know is how many hours that you should be working. I'm going to put should very, very specifically, because most of us, it's not a 9-to-5 job. Most of us, there are many more hours that we're working. We're taking our work home with us. We go to work in the morning at like 6 or 7. We work on things before the practice gets started. We see guests all day long. We probably end up doing some work stuff even while we're eating at lunch. We go back to work, and then we work until, say, 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever. We frantically put everything back together again. We get in the car, we go home, we have a quick meal with our family. They really don't see us much. We kind of eat, and we just go straight back to work again. That's not really a good life to have. And again, that's not leading toward this double win that Michael talked about, which is to win at work and succeed at life. You need to make sure you set some boundaries in your life. And I had a conversation with my wife many years before I had gotten into this Business Accelerator thing. It was one of the reasons why I chose to do this, because Michael had a similar discussion with his wife. But I came home one night about 7:30. Dinner was going to be ready about 6. My wife is an educator. My kids were in their early teens. And I came just kind of strolling in like the savior I was, because I had a hard life. I had to do my job, and I got through my dinner and was getting ready to grab my computer and start working again, and my wife said, "Hey Ted, I need to talk to you for a minute." I said, "Okay." And she sat me down and she said, for the last, I don't know how long, I've kind of felt like a single parent. You work all day, and I'm not saying I don't appreciate the fact that you're working, but I work too. And, I work, then I came home and I made our meal, and you kind of just stroll in whenever you're ready, and we have to wait on you. And it's not really fair to us that this is how things go. So I need you to understand that if you're not going to be home by 6, I need you to let me know. Well, what that told me was I need to be home by 6. I need to figure out a way to make sure I got home by 6. So what I did was I set an alarm on my phone, and every day at 5:30, and it also goes off on my computer, it says go home. No matter what I'm doing, I cut it off and I'm done. If I'm in the middle of something, I get at least to a stopping point. Now, it's really close to home for me. I have a 1.5 mile drive from my house to my office, which is yet another really good thing to say about living in a rural practice. Traffic for me means it took me 7 minutes to get home instead of 5. So knowing I can leave the office and be home by 6 o'clock in at the most 7 minutes gives me a little bit of a window of time to know at 5:30 go home means finish up what you're doing as much as you possibly can, and make sure you leave the office by probably 12 minutes before it's time to walk in the door. because when I can walk in the door before 6, my wife is very happy. She really enjoys the fact that I can come in that early. And so that's what I strive to do. Okay, so we know it's about $500. But let's say you're not working 8 hours a day. Let's say you're working 12 hours a day. Think about that for a minute. All those things that you're doing, they're stretching that time out a lot further. So if you're working 12 hours a day, take that 500 divided by 12, that means you're getting paid about $41.67 an hour to do your job. Kind of sobering, isn't it? Whereas if you're working 8 hours a day, you're getting paid $62.50. That's almost a $20 raise per hour just to be better with your time. And here's the thing you're thinking to yourself, Ted, okay, look, if I cut that stuff out, I'm not going to get stuff done. Yeah, you will. Here's how I know that. You remember last time you were getting ready to go on vacation? And you had all this stuff that you had to get done, and you wrote out a list of things that needed to get done, and you checked off like 90% of it. And you felt really good about it because you knew that when you got back to work, you don't have to deal with this 10% of stuff. And when you got back, there was actually like maybe double that more to do because some new stuff piled up on top of your old stuff. So now instead of having, 90% done, you kind of got 80% done because of the new things that showed up there. But you still didn't have 100% of it left. You got a lot of things done because you set some constraints. You knew you had to leave by this time. You knew you had to get these things done. You got more focused. You didn't look at Facebook as much. You didn't start looking at things on your computer. I know. I do it too. I get distracted just like everybody else. I can't tell you how many times the squirrel runs across the desk for me and I've just completely lost what I was supposed to be getting done. And I'm supposed to be the guy with all the answers, right? I mess up too. So, put in the amount of hours that you should be working. Now you know your number. And in this case, we used with $100,000 at 200 days a year with working 8 hours. It's $62.50. Here's why that number is important. Any task that you can get someone else to do or teach someone else to do that costs less than $62.50 per hour, you need to let them do it and not you. Because you are now costing your business money by doing it. You are taking a resource. You're taking a $300 fuse and you're protecting a 50-cent piece of technology. That doesn't make sense. You need to make sure you're using something that's going to be less expensive than the thing that you're doing to get it done. Good example. Fixing our computers, IT stuff. I can't tell you how many times someone has come to me and said, "Hey doc, the computer didn't back up last night." My answer now is call Bill. Bill is our IT specialist. He's great. But you don't understand. It didn't back up last night. Yeah, call Bill. But it needs to be fixed. Call Bill. You know why I don't want to do that? Well, my IT specialist in this scenario, and we're going to use the same numbers I just used, costs $150 an hour to fix something in my office. And that's including pretty much the drive over. Okay? He can usually fix it in about an hour. It's $150. It's going to take me at least 3 hours. That's going to cost $87.50 more than it's going to cost Bill to fix it. Not to mention the fact that I've been distracted from what I'm supposed to be doing, when really, if I'm only getting paid $62.50 per hour, I'm probably generating a lot more than $62.50 per hour. In fact, I know what our generation is. It's well above that per OD hour. But I'm taking my $62.50 things that I can generate way more than that for, and I'm applying it to something that's a lot lower task, isn't something that's really urgent, but it's distracting me from what's really important. And think of the other things that you do in your practice. Are you still the one that does all your pupil measurements? Are you the one that does all your motilities? Are you the one that does the confrontation fields? Are you checking your own VAs for all your guests? Are you doing your own refractions? I'm not talking about going and checking them when they get done. I'm talking about doing the entire process. Old days of optometry, that's what it was like. There was usually two people in the practice. One was this lady that sat up front, and her job was to greet the guests when they came in. She would say hello, answer the phone, and say, "The doctor will be with you in a moment." And then the doctor would come up and do every single thing from there forward. Usually I apologize, ladies, usually he would take this guest back to the back of the practice, do the entire exam, then walk them up to the dispensary, the optical, and it was a dispensary back then. They would walk them up to the dispensary, and they would select the frames with that guest. They would make some measurements with the lenses. They would create the order. They would actually go and cut the lenses a lot of times if they had that ability to do that sort of thing. They'd put them all together. They would make sure that it was all ready to go, and they would do everything well except for collect money, because collecting money is dirty, and doctors don't need to be doing that. I mean, we don't even want to talk about money, but everything else was done by that doctor. And you know what? It wasn't done nearly as good as it's done now, because there's people in your practice that you can bring in that can do these things less expensively, for one thing, but probably better. And that's, I think, the big thing that probably gets in our way is our ego, because nobody does it better than me. Well, I got news for you. There's a lot of people who do it better than me. Thank God. Because we can get more things done. And that's what scaling is really about, because there's a little bit of a balance of things, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to see the amount of people you need to see in your practice if you're the one that's doing everything. And that's getting in the way, especially important if you are doing a lot of managed care in your practice, vision and care plans especially. The reimbursements that you're getting there, I hear it all the time from people. Man, my services are worth way more than that. Well, apparently they're not, because we signed a contract to accept those fees. The only person that's responsible for what you're getting paid is you. I'm the one that signed that contract with that particular vision care plan, not anybody else. I decided that that's what my services are worth. But you can use those services and make them affordable and push them in a direction where you're building up the medical side of your practice, or you're creating more things that would be non-covered services. And I know I'm getting a little bit off track, but it's important, because all of those type of tasks can still be delegated to someone else, given the way your licensure works in your state and what they'll allow you to do. But you can offload some of that stuff to someone else who's less expensive and maybe does it better. Again, my IT guy can fix my problem on my computer in about an hour. It takes me at least 3. That's going to cost $87.50 more for him to fix it. Now, we're going to have an upcoming episode that'll talk about what you can do with this time that you've now developed and felt, but you got to figure out what tasks you don't need to be doing anymore. And we'll talk about that in an upcoming episode, because I want you to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing with your time and how much it costs. So today, go home. I'm giving you a task. Go home and write down these numbers. What is your W-2? How many days a year are you working on or in that business? How many hours of that day should you be working? And figure out a way to put some constraints on it so you're only doing those things. And you'll find out you'll get a lot more things done. You'll get them done a lot more effectively. I've really enjoyed spending time with you today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, even if you haven't, please leave us a very honest review of the podcast and give us a rating. Hopefully it's a 5-star rating. If it's not, that's great too, because we need to learn what's working well for us in this podcast. Thanks for being here today. I look forward to seeing you again soon.